The year is 1911. Inside the Louvre Museum in Paris, one of the largest and most prestigious art institutions in the entire world, a man is walking down a grand, quiet hallway. He is wearing a clean, white smock, which is the exact uniform worn by the museum's official maintenance staff. To anyone passing by, he looks like a regular, hard-working employee going about his daily routine. He stops in front of a modest-sized painting of a woman with an enigmatic smile. Enigmatic is a word used to describe something that is mysterious, puzzling, and incredibly difficult to fully interpret or understand. The painting is, of course, Leonardo da Vinci's Mona Lisa. At this exact moment in history, the Mona Lisa is not yet the global, untouchable icon it is today. It is highly respected by art critics, but the average person walking the streets of Paris barely knows it exists. The man in the white smock looks left and right down the corridor. The gallery is completely empty. With a calm, unshakable confidence, he reaches up, lifts the heavy wooden panel straight off its 4 iron wall pegs, and ducks into a nearby service stairwell. In less than 10 minutes, he walks out the front doors of the museum and melts into the busy Parisian streets. The masterpiece has vanished into thin air. What the world is about to find out is that this wasn't the work of an international criminal syndicate, which is a highly organized, professional network of international thieves. Instead, it was planned and executed by a single, quiet Italian handyman named Vincenzo Peruggia and his simple, audacious heist. An audacious heist meaning a robbery that is incredibly bold, daring, and shockingly reckless, is the exact event that will turn the Mona Lisa into the most famous face on planet Earth. To understand how a regular handyman could just walk out of a world-class museum with a priceless masterpiece, you have to understand the sheer vulnerability of the Louvre in 1911. Today, modern museums are heavily fortified fortresses. They utilize high-definition security cameras, laser tripwires, motion sensors, and glass cases equipped with silent, automated alarms that instantly alert local police departments. But in the early 20th century, security was laughably primitive, meaning it was basic, outdated, and almost useless. The Louvre was a massive labyrinth of over 1,000 rooms, holding hundreds of thousands of invaluable artifacts. Yet, during the day, this sprawling complex was guarded by a total of only 150 security officers. This meant that a single guard was often responsible for watching over multiple massive galleries simultaneously, leaving countless blind spots for hours at a time. To make matters worse, the museum security staff was notoriously relaxed. They frequently left their posts to smoke cigarettes, chat with colleagues, or take long breaks. Even more shocking is how the museum handled the artwork itself. The paintings were not locked behind thick, bulletproof glass or bolted securely into the walls. They simply hung on standard iron hooks. In fact, paintings were removed from the walls so frequently by the museum's official staff, either to be cleaned, cataloged, or taken to the internal photography studio to be archived, that if a painting suddenly went missing, the guards wouldn't even panic. They would just assume a curator or a staff photographer had moved it to another room for routine maintenance. A curator is an expert manager whose job is to oversee, organize, and preserve an art collection. Vincenzo Peruggia spent months working inside the Louvre as a glazier, a specialized craftsman whose job is to cut and fit glass paneling. He was hired by a private company contracted by the Louvre to build heavy, protective glass covers for some of their most valuable paintings, because the museum was terrified of vandals scratching or throwing ink at the art. Because of this job, Peruggia possessed 2 massive advantages that no ordinary criminal could ever buy: institutional knowledge and total anonymity. Institutional knowledge means he understood the internal, daily habits, schedules, and weaknesses of the organization. He knew exactly which days the museum was closed for cleaning. He knew the changing times of the guard shifts, and he knew which rooms were left completely unattended. Anonymity means he was a ghost inside the building. He wore the standard white smock, carried the tools of the trade, and belonged in the hallways. If a guard saw him standing near a painting, they wouldn't ask for his identification or question his motives. They would just see a working-class handyman doing his job. Peruggia's motive for the theft was driven by a powerful psychological mix of fierce nationalism and intense personal resentment. Peruggia was an Italian immigrant living in Paris, and he regularly faced harsh discrimination and xenophobia from the local French population. Xenophobia is a deep-seated, irrational prejudice or hatred directed toward people from other countries. The French workers mocked his accent, called him derogatory names, and treated him like a second-class citizen. As he worked long hours inside the Louvre, surrounded by breathtaking Italian masterpieces, painted by legends like Leonardo da Vinci, Raphael, and Michelangelo, a dark, obsessive thought began to consume his mind. He genuinely believed that all of these beautiful treasures had been brutally stolen from his beloved homeland by the French military dictator Napoleon Bonaparte during the Napoleonic Wars of the early 1800s. Peruggia decided that he was going to be a heroic, patriotic avenger. He would steal an Italian masterpiece back from the French and return it to its rightful home on Italian soil. However, Peruggia's historical narrative was completely flawed. It was a historical delusion. In reality, Leonardo da Vinci had moved to France voluntarily late in his life to work for King Francis I. The king had legally purchased the Mona Lisa directly from the artist for a massive sum of gold. The painting belonged to France, completely fair and square. But Peruggia didn't care about historical facts. He only cared about his personal crusade for vengeance and glory. The execution of the heist began on Sunday evening, August 20th, 1911. Sunday was a regular public day at the Louvre, meaning the building was packed with thousands of tourists. Peruggia walked into the museum during regular hours, blended seamlessly into the crowds, and slipped into a small, deep storage closet, hidden away in an unmapped service corridor. He pulled the door shut and sat quietly in the pitch-black darkness for hours, listening to the echoing footsteps of the last visitors leaving the building and the heavy wooden doors being locked from the outside. Monday, August 21st, was the most critical day of the operation. Monday was the museum's official closure day, meaning the entire building was completely closed to the public, so that an army of maintenance workers, janitors, and glaziers could sweep the floors and clean the exhibits. At around 7 a.m., Peruggia quietly stepped out of his dark closet. He was already wearing his white worker's smock. He walked confidently through the grand, empty halls of the museum, his boots clicking softly against the polished hardwood floors. He made his way directly to the Salon Carré, the high-ceilinged gallery where the Mona Lisa hung. He waited patiently nearby, pretending to examine the architecture, until he observed the specific guard responsible for that wing leave his post to take a morning bathroom break. The moment the gallery was completely empty, Peruggia sprang into action. He stepped up to the Mona Lisa, grabbed the heavy wooden frame, and unhooked it from the wall. The entire object, consisting of the heavy glass protective case he had ironically helped build, a massive ornamental frame, and the wooden panel the artwork was painted on, weighed nearly 40 pounds. Peruggia carried the heavy structure into a nearby, isolated service stairwell. Working rapidly in the dim light, he used his glazier tools to carefully unscrew the protective glass case and remove the outer decorative frame, stripping the artwork down to its rawest form, a modest 30 by 21-inch poplar wood panel featuring the painted image of Lisa Gherardini. He wrapped his white cotton worker's smock tightly around the wooden panel to hide the face, tucking the bundle firmly under his arm. But right when he thought he was about to make a clean escape, he hit a terrifying, unexpected obstacle. When he reached the bottom of the stairwell, he found that the heavy utility exit door leading out to the courtyard was locked solid from the outside. He was trapped inside the stairwell with a stolen national treasure under his arm. Showing incredible composure under extreme pressure, Peruggia took out a screwdriver from his pocket and began meticulously unscrewing the brass doorknob, hoping to force the internal lock mechanism open. Suddenly, he heard heavy footsteps echoing from the other side of the door. The door opened, and standing there was a real Louvre maintenance worker named Sauvé. Peruggia's heart pounded, but he didn't run or panic. Instead, He looked at Sauvé with a frustrated, annoyed expression, held up the loose brass doorknob, and complained that the lock was completely broken and that he couldn't get his work done. Sauvé, completely fooled by Peruggia's worker uniform and calm demeanor, apologized for the inconvenience. He took out his own master key, unlocked the doorframe, and politely held it open, wishing Peruggia a good morning. Peruggia nodded politely, walked right past him into the open courtyard, exited the outer gates of the Louvre, and disappeared into the bustling morning crowds of Paris. He boarded a public bus and headed straight back to his tiny, single-room apartment in the working-class district of the city. The museum's reaction to the theft was an absolute masterclass in incompetence, which means a complete and total lack of ability, skill, or professional awareness. The heist occurred on Monday morning, but because Monday was closure day, the vast majority of the guards weren't paying attention to empty spots on the walls. It wasn't until Tuesday morning, August 22nd, when the museum officially reopened to the public, that an independent painter named Louis Béroud walked into the gallery to make a creative sketch of the Mona Lisa. When he arrived, he found nothing but 4 empty iron pegs sticking out of the bare wall. Béroud was annoyed, but he didn't think a crime had occurred. He walked over to a nearby guard and asked how long the photography studio planned to keep the painting. The guard laughed, shrugged his shoulders, and said it would probably be back in a few hours. It took several hours of casual back-and-forth messaging between different departments before someone finally walked up to the photography studio and asked, "Hey, do you guys have the Mona Lisa?" The photographers looked confused and said they hadn't seen the painting in weeks. Suddenly, panic rippled through the administration. The realization hit them like a physical blow. The painting hadn't been moved for maintenance. It had been stolen. The Louvre went into immediate lockdown. The heavy iron gates were slammed shut, hundreds of visitors were searched, and the police were called. But it was already 24 hours too late. Peruggia had executed the theft on Monday, and by Tuesday afternoon, the painting was sitting safely hidden away inside a false-bottom trunk in his apartment, just a few miles away. The disappearance of the Mona Lisa triggered an absolute global media frenzy. It became a sensationalized international scandal, dominating the front-page headlines of newspapers from Paris to New York, London, and Berlin. Headlines screamed about the greatest art theft of the century. The French public was deeply outraged and humiliated. The director of the Louvre was fired immediately, and the French police launched a massive, sprawling investigation, but they were completely out of their depth. The police began fingerprinting every single employee and contractor who had ever worked inside the Louvre. They actually interviewed Vincenzo Peruggia inside his tiny apartment. The detectives walked right past the wooden trunk, where the Mona Lisa was wrapped in cloth, never bothering to open it. Peruggia looked them in the eye, gave them a flawless alibi, claiming he had been late to work on Monday morning because he was suffering from a severe hangover, and the police politely thanked him and crossed his name off the suspect list. The investigation became so desperate that the police began chasing wild, absurd conspiracy theories. They arrested the famous avant-garde poet Guillaume Apollinaire and held him in a prison cell for days because he had once jokingly said the Louvre should be burned down. They even brought in the legendary painter Pablo Picasso for aggressive interrogation, suspecting he was part of an international art theft ring, before releasing him due to a total lack of evidence. As the months turned into years, the Mona Lisa remained completely missing. But instead of fading from public memory, the painting's fame exploded exponentially, meaning it grew at an incredibly fast, accelerating rate. Because newspapers couldn't publish new photos of the recovery, they filled their pages with beautiful, dramatic reproductions of her face, speculating on her mysterious smile and the identity of the thief. Thousands of people actually queued up outside the Louvre just to look at the tragic, empty space on the wall where the painting used to hang. It became a cultural phenomenon. People were mourning the loss of a masterpiece they had never cared about when it was actually there. For over 2 full years, the Mona Lisa sat in the dark inside Peruggia's cramped apartment. Peruggia lived a quiet, modest life, working odd jobs and waiting for the intense international heat to die down. By late 1913, he decided that the coast was finally clear and that it was time to fulfill his patriotic destiny. He packed the painting into his trunk, boarded a train, and crossed the border into Italy, arriving in the beautiful, historic city of Florence. He checked into a modest hotel and contacted a prominent Italian art dealer named Alfredo Geri. Peruggia sent him a letter signed under the fake name Leonardo, stating that he possessed the stolen Mona Lisa and wanted to return it to an Italian museum under one strict condition. The Italian government had to pay him a finder's fee of 500,000 Italian lire to honor his patriotic service. Geri was highly skeptical, believing it was a cruel hoax or a cheap fake. He contacted Giovanni Poggi, the director of the world-famous Uffizi Gallery in Florence. Together, the two men agreed to meet this mysterious seller inside his hotel room to inspect the object. When they arrived, Peruggia locked the door, opened his wooden trunk, pulled out a pile of old shoes and dirty clothing, and lifted up a false wooden bottom. He pulled out the wrapped bundle and placed the Mona Lisa onto the hotel bed. Poggi and Geri were absolutely stunned. They carefully examined the back of the poplar wood panel, matching the unique wood grain patterns and the official museum catalog numbers stamped by the Louvre. It was, beyond a shadow of a doubt, the authentic, original masterpiece. Poggi played along, maintaining absolute composure. He told Peruggia that he needed to take the painting back to the Uffizi Gallery under the cover of night so he could use advanced lighting equipment to run a final verification check, promising to return with his full cash reward the following morning. Peruggia, blinded by his own arrogance and his belief that he would be celebrated as a national hero, readily agreed. Poggi carried the painting out of the hotel, walked straight to the local authorities, and alerted the Italian police. Within an hour, armed detectives raided Peruggia's hotel room and placed him under arrest. The great international mystery was finally solved, not by brilliant detective work, but by the sheer, unforced error of the thief's own naive pride. The trial of Vincenzo Peruggia became an absolute media circus. The Italian public was deeply divided. While the French viewed him as a vile, uncultured criminal, many Italians genuinely viewed him as a romantic, patriotic folk hero who had stood up against French cultural arrogance. During the trial, Peruggia gave an emotional defense, arguing that he never intended to sell the painting to a private collector for personal enrichment. He only wanted to restore Italy's honor by placing it in an Italian museum. Because of the immense public sympathy and the political tension between Italy and France, the Italian court handed Peruggia an incredibly lenient sentence, meaning his punishment was exceptionally mild, soft, and forgiving. He was sentenced to just 1 year and 15 days in prison, which was later reduced to a mere 7 months. Upon his release, he served in the Italian military during the First World War, later got married, and ironically moved right back to France under a different name to open a small, quiet paint shop, living out the rest of his days in complete obscurity. Before returning the painting to France, the Italian government hosted a massive, triumphant farewell tour. The Mona Lisa was exhibited in crowded museums across Florence, Rome, and Milan, drawing millions of emotional citizens who wanted to catch a glimpse of the masterpiece before it left Italian soil forever. In January 1914, the painting was officially escorted back to Paris in a luxury, first-class train compartment, guarded by a small army of elite international diplomats and police officers. When the Mona Lisa was finally rehung on the walls of the Louvre, it was no longer just another Renaissance painting sitting quietly in a hallway. It was now a global superstar, a legendary survivor of the greatest heist in human history, and an international symbol of intrigue, mystery, and cultural warfare. Vincenzo Peruggia had set out to steal the painting away from the world, but through his audacious crime, he inadvertently gave it to the world forever.